How long should a sermon last? Until it's finished. That's how long a sermon should last. I have been told by many people that sermons shouldn't last longer than 20 minutes. I can't clear my throat in 20 minutes, but that's been you're not going to get 20 minutes here. But the reality of it is there's no specific length. You preach the text, you read the text, you explain the text, and you exhort from the text.
So one thing that I can wholeheartedly affirm here is that some passages of Scripture do take longer to expound. I preach through the Gospel of John, and the units of thought in John's Gospel are notoriously long and complex, and it's nearly impossible to do them justice in 20 to 25 minutes. Now I'm preaching through the book of Titus with shorter units of thought, less complex, and my sermons have averaged about 20 to 25 minutes. And that's probably the average for a ministry, sometimes 30 minutes on Sunday morning. But what I think is a little simplistic about this video on sermon length is that there's a lot of other factors that go into sermon length. For example, how well a preacher has prepared. If someone is well prepared, I find that they tend to be more concise. If they're disciplined in not telling the congregation everything that they've learned in the study, they are able to communicate the key ideas in a more concise way. There's an old anecdote, and I think it's attributed to Abraham Lincoln, that Lincoln was asked to speak. And he said, "If you need me to speak for an hour, I'm ready now. If you need me to speak for a minute, I'm going to need a week to prepare." And the idea is that in order to be concise and communicate meaningfully in a short span of time, you've got to do the work in the study and not be thinking on your feet in the pulpit, because you're going to end up rambling and going down rabbit trails. Another key factor in the length of your sermon is the length of your church's liturgy as a whole. If you're worshiping in a historically Christian way, for example, if you have weekly Eucharist, if you have multiple scripture readings in your service, our church tends to have an Old Testament reading, a New Testament reading, often a Gospels reading, and a Psalms reading. And so if you're having 40 to 50 verses of scripture read in the service, plus communion and confession of sin and confessing your faith in the words of the apostles of the Nicene Creed and singing the Gloria Patri and the doxology and all these other elements to your service, you just don't have as long to preach. Unless your service is going to be really long, and I try to limit our services to about an hour and 15 to an hour and 20 minutes on a Sunday morning. And so this has forced me to preach sermons that are about 20 to 25 minutes. And I've actually found that it's been really helpful because I found you can say a lot in that length of time when you're forced to do so. You can communicate very meaningfully. And so, in short, I would say, be brief, brothers, be brief, because in general, if you do the work, you can be.